Paul starts to set some things in order. Verse 14 says of 1 Corinthians chapter 1, I thank God that I baptized none of you, but Crispus and Gaius, lest any should say that I've baptized in my own name. And I baptized also the household of Stephanas. Besides, I know not whether I baptized any other. Verse 17, for Christ sent me not to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not with wisdom of words, lest the cross of Christ should be made of none effect. Notice how he uses the preaching of the gospel with the cross of Christ interchangeable. Those are interchangeable terms. If we're preaching the cross, then we're preaching Christ. If we are preaching the cross, we're going to see from the next verse, we're preaching the gospel. Look at verse 18. For the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness, but unto us which are saved it is the power of God. Drop down to verse 23. But we preach Christ crucified, unto the Jews a stumbling block, unto the Greeks foolishness. But unto them which are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. So again here, we have the preaching of the gospel declared in verse 17, the preaching of the cross in verse 18, and the preaching of Christ crucified in verse 23. Those are all interchangeable. They all make up the amazing grace of God. God's grace is so huge. God's grace is so amazing that was displayed at Calvary, on the cross, in the death and atonement that Jesus made, that there has to be many phrases to communicate the power of God's grace. So when I preach the cross, I'm preaching the gospel. If I preach the gospel, I'm preaching the cross. If I talk about Christ crucified in any way, form, or fashion, I'm talking about the cross. And that's where the power of God is released in people's lives.